one of the famous nevuas of Nachamu, of comfort, after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, was the nevuah of Chaya, where Yeshaya says in Kapitel Mem, Pasuk Aleph, Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami Yoimar Alikechem, that Hashem gives a double comfort to the Yidden. And like the Medrash says in Yalkut Yeshaya, the Medrash says, Loku b'kiflayim, u'misnachamim b'kiflayim. That the Yidden were smitten, so to speak, with double, and therefore Hashem will comfort them also b'kiflayim with double. And the question is asked, what exactly does this mean? What's the teichen of being comforted in a double way, in a way of Nachamu, Nachamu? And this could be explained by first discussing the Gemara at the end of Masechta Makos, Daf Chof Daled Amud Aleph, famous story with Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues, and where the Gemara ends off over there, Akiva Nichamtanu. So perhaps we can apply the concept over there to the inyan of Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. And the Gemara says on the Chof Daled Amud Aleph in Makos, at the end of Makos, Ukfar Hoya, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Akiva. These four Tanoim were going together, were Mahalchin Baderech, V'shambu Koil HaMoina Shal Reimi. They heard a very big sound, a very big clamoring noise, which represented life and enjoyment from Rome, and they were still a far distance away. They were 120 mil away. And the Chachamim who were walking with Rabbi Akiva, they were Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and Rabbi Yeshua, started crying. And the Gemara relates that Rabbi Akiva laughed. And they asked Rabbi Akiva, why are you laughing? This is such a sad situation. So they said, why are you crying? So the Tanoim said that these Goyim are enjoying life so much during the time that Beis Elokeinu is burnt, and this is no good. So it evoked tears. And Rabbi Akiva answers, says the Gemara, that this is the reason why I'm laughing. Because of those who are transgressing the will of Hashem, they are able to have such enjoyment in life. We who are doing the Ratzon of Hashem, Allah is kam v'kamo, for sure, we're going to have amazing things. And then the Gemara says, Weiter, Shuv Pamachas, at a different opportunity, Hayu Oilin Yerushalayim. They were coming up to Yerushalayim, they came to Harat Seifim, and they rent their clothes because they saw the Mokem HaChurban. And then, when they got to the Harabayis, they beheld a shu'al, a fox, which was going out of the base, Kodshei HaKadoshim. And they started to cry. The colleagues of Rabbi Akiva again started to cry. And Rabbi Akiva laughed. And they asked Rabbi Akiva, why are you laughing? And he said, why are you crying? So they said, about the Beis HaMikdash, it says, V'hazar HaKarev Yumos, that someone who's a Zar is not allowed to go into certain parts of the Beis HaMikdash. And we know this refers to several things. And look here, you have a shu'al, you have a fox going out of the Kodshei HaKadoshim. That's very sad. So the Rabbi Akiva answered that this is the reason why I'm laughing. And he quoted that in the Navi in Yeshaya, in the beginning of Perek Ches, the Navi says a very interesting thing. The Navi says, Va'idoli edim ne'amonim es Uri HaKohen v'es Zechariah ben Yiverech Yahu. And these two people lived at a span of about 500 years. Uri HaKohen said Nevuah at the end of the first Beis HaMikdash, and Zechariah said his Nevuah at the end of the second Beis HaMikdash, when it came time towards the Churban. So the question is, why in Yeshaya is he putting these two Nevi'im together? Why Va'ida bi Eidim Ne'amonim? Va'ida li Eidim Ne'amonim? Why are these two Eidim going together as two witnesses, Uri and Zechariah? So Rabbi Akiva explains that Uriah said a very strong negative nevuah about the Churban, where it says Tzion Sada Secharesh, which means that Yerushalayim will be plowed like a field, which is a very, very strong nevuah, which is a very negative thing. And Zechariah says a nevuah as well, but it's a positive nevuah, that Oid Yeshu was Kenes Bercheves Yerushalayim. which is talking about the time when the Yidden will come back after the Golus is finished. So Rabbi Akiva told his colleagues that being that Yeshaya Hanavi put these two nevuas in one pasuk, Eidim Ne'amonim, two Eidim that go together, so it must be that they're connected. And he said, till now, I didn't know if the Navi of Zechariah would be fulfilled. But now that I see that the Navi of Uriah was fulfilled, that Tzia in Sada Sei Charesh, his strong negative nevuah was fulfilled, now I know that the good nevuah of the Geula is also going to be fulfilled. And this is why I'm laughing, because I could see the tremendous goodness. And the colleagues of Rabbi Akiva answered, Akiva nichamtanu, and that's the end of the Masechta of Makos. In explanation of what was the difference in approach between Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues, why the colleagues always started with a cry and Rabbi Akiva always started with a laugh. It's explained in Likutei Sichos, Chelik Yotes, page 70 and on, as follows: that Rabbi Akiva asked his colleagues, why did they start crying at that point? Everybody knew that Raimi was living it up, and they knew that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. What made them cry at that point? So they answered him, Taka, we know that Raimi is living good, but now we came to the realization that even though they were strong and there was a nevuah that Beis Hamikdash should fall in the hands of a strong nation, but that already happened a long time ago. Why is it necessary that now, after the tragedy of the Churban Beis Hamikdash, Raimi is still strong? Beis Elokeinu is burnt, is destroyed, and Raimi is still strong. Why is that? And that brought them to tears as something which was an extra Chilul Hashem. And then Rabbi Akiva answered them that if Oivrei Ritzoynai are having it so good, it must be that Oisei Ritzoynai are going to have it even better, and this is what's bringing me to laugh. When I see that Oivrei Ritzoynai are having it so good, I apply it to how it's going to be for the Yidden who are doing the will of Hashem, that for sure it's going to be much, much better. And Rabbi Akiva asked them in regard with the fox coming out of the Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim, why is it that you're crying? And they said, we knew that the Churban has to happen and that it's going to be something very sad. But why does the Nevuah of Tzia in Sada Sei Charesh, that Yerushalayim will be plowed as a field, why does that Nevuah have to be fulfilled in the Kodesh HaKadoshim? Let it be fulfilled somewhere else, in a place of lesser Kedusha. But why in the Kodesh HaKadoshim in such a terrible way? And this brought them to cry. And Rabbi Akiva said that this is what made me laugh. Because when I see that the Nevuah of Uriah HaKohen is being fulfilled in such a big way, it shows me that the Nevuah of Zechariah, which is brought together with the Nevuah of Uriah HaKohen, is also going to be fulfilled in the greatest way possible. How do I know that? Because the Navi Yeshaya brings them together. He brings the two Nevi'im together as two Eidim, as two witnesses. So if one witness is fulfilled, then for sure the other witness is a Hemshech and is going to be fulfilled as well. And what we see over here in the second story is 2 points. Number one, like we see in the first story, that the Geula is going to come in an amazing way. That life will be very, very good. And that the Nevuah of Zechariah is going to be fulfilled in the highest way. We see a second point. The Nevuah of Uriah was Tzion Sada Sei Charesh, and Rabbi Akiva is tying based on the Navi in Yeshaya that it's the beginning, it's part of the Nevuah. He's a aid, he's a witness together with Zechariah. They go together. So what we see over here is that Tzia in Sada Sei Charesh, what Uriah said, that Yerushalayim will be plowed. Plowing is always the beginning of the growing which is going to come later. Plowing is not considered a bad thing when a person plows a field. Plowing is a good thing because of what's going to come after that. So by Uriah HaKohen, the first of the two Eidim, describing the Churban, Beis Hamikdash and Yerushalayim in a way of Tzia in Sada Sei Charesh, he's showing that the Churban is really a beginning of the Geula of what Zechariah prophesied about that the Churban is the beginning of the Nevuah of the Geula. So not only do we see that just like the Galus, the Churban was fulfilled in a very strong way, is that a proof that the Geula will be fulfilled in an amazing way? But even more than that, the Galus is the beginning, it's the plowing to prepare for the growing produce of the coming Geula. And we see that this perspective of Rabbi Akiva, to not look at how things are in the present, but to look at how things will be in the future, the Hidur, the amazing things that will come out in the future, that overpowered his colleagues. And when his colleagues saw that not only it's going to be good in the future, but that the good is going to be starting already at that point, that it's considered a harisha, it's considered a plowing in order to get ready for the geula which is going to grow out of it, then they said a double Nachamu. They said, we are comforted. Akiva nichamtanu. They said a double comfort because they were doubly comforted. They thought that it was a double laku because they said not only was there the Churban, but even more than that, there's an extra chilul Hashem on top of the Churban. That Reimi is still strong and there's a shul coming out of the Kachei HaKadoshim. That's a huge laku, that's a huge hitting and subjugation, subduing the Yidden. But Rabbi Akiva came along and said, number one, something very good is going to come out of this. There's a huge hiddur which is going to come out of this. And not only is it going to be very great which is going to come out of this, which that's one Nechama, but it started now already. It started with the Charisha. The Charisha is the beginning of the goodnesses which is going to come out later. And that gave them a double Nechama because at that point they were able to feel already that they didn't have a reason to cry. Actually, they had a reason to be happy, just like Rabbi Akiva, because they could already see the goodness which is going to come out. And according to this, we can explain the Nachamu. Because just like in the story in Masechta Makis, in the end of Masechta Makis, that the Nachamu, that the double Nechama was, number one, realizing the goodness which is going to come out, and second of all, realizing that the Galus is the beginning of that goodness. We could say the same shot in the double Nachamu that Hashem tells the Yidden in the Navi Yeshaya as a comfort after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, that Nachamu. Hashem is telling us, number one, something very good will come out. It's going to be very, very good for the Yidden if the Goyim could have it so good. But even more so, we have to know that the Churban Abayis is actually the Charisha. It's the beginning of what's going to come out. It's the Nevuah of Uriah, which is the beginning of the Nevuah of Zechariah, which is a Nevuah of the coming Geula. It's just interesting to note that Rabbi Akiva, who in these two stories saw always the goodness, especially in the second story, he saw how at that point there wasn't even any negativity, even while they saw the shul coming out of the Beis Kachei HaKadoshim. It's interesting to note that generally in the Gemara we find that Rabbi Akiva did not necessarily have such a outlook. It says in the Gemara in Brachas Daf Samach that Rabbi Akiva would say, Kol ma'ad of the Rachmanu l'tavav. And the stories that are brought in connection with this are stories that show that Rabbi Akiva's perspective was that even if there's tsar, even if something happens which doesn't seem to be good, we should know that there's a good which is going to come out of it. And like the first story, similar to the first story in Masechta Makis, that even though now Roimi is Oivred Tzayna are having it good, but La'ised Tzayna will have it good later on. So now it's not good, but it's a good omen for the future. This is contrasted with the conduct of the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva. It says in Chagiga Daf Yud Beis that Rabbi Akiva was the Talmud of Nachamu Gamzu. And regarding Nachamu Gamzu, it says in Tainis Daf Chaf Aleph and Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Ches that Nachamu Gamzu used to say Gamzu L'Toiva. Gamzu L'Toiva means that there's no tsar. Differently contrasted with Kol Ma'ada of the Rachmanu L'Tava of it. That now there's tsar, but it's going to come out for a good purpose. Nachamu Gamzu used to say, Zula Toiva, this itself is good. It's not an Indian of Tsar from which something good will come out later. This itself is Toiv. And Rabbi Akiva, who usually didn't have this perspective of Nachamu Gamzu, he was a generation later. Nonetheless, for here in this Gemara, he was able to reflect his Rebbe, Nachamu Gamzu. And he was able to show that this event, this incident which they beheld of the shul of the fox coming out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, that itself was a good thing. That itself was the Charisha, the beginning of the Nevuah of Zechariah and the Nevuah of the coming Geula.